Alright, so today, okay, so I'm gonna look at your work from what you were asked of for what you were told to do. So, what I'm gonna start looking at right now is the perspective and how perspective works. So, perspective allows us to pick one spot on a horizontal and or vertical axis and come out from any direction and fill in areas with forms that go back into space or into the distance. So when I'm looking at your piece in particular, is when I'm looking at this, we're kind of straight on. There's three, this is the center point right here, somewhere around there, and there's three characters, one bird, one alien looking thing, and Screech. It looks like Screech. So what we want to start looking at right now is we need to get your backgrounds to be a little bit more in perspective. So we are going to take, if you draw a box, a rectangle on your page, we're going to practice making grid. So for this grid, I want you to pick a point anywhere on the page, and I want you to make a big, long line across, and then do the same thing from one edge, from one edge of the box to another, and then you're going to subdivide it. People think perspective can be very tricky, and that is true. It can be. But once you understand how it works, it can become a great tool for making things feel more realistic. So once we have something that looks like this, you want to make sure you know where your horizon line is, which should be maybe a little bit darker for this exercise. And we're going to start playing with the different shapes and things in perspective. Alright? So for the sake of this image right here, I'm going to start with these shapes that are a little bit like chairs. Alright? So if I'm in a theater, and say my chair is right here, everything below the line is like a road. Everything above the line is like the top of a building. If I connect two of these down here, it makes it feel like a sidewalk. Alright? So that's where my line is. If I put one behind it, that kind of feels like you're doing a street light, because if I extend it, there's your street light. So by putting in that extra line, you can add thickness behind and further away. Alright? So if I take it this way instead of adding thickness this direction, and if I want to make it longer and go this direction, I would go this way and move it up like this. Now you don't have to worry about having perfect rounded shapes right now, or perfect what they are. You just need to worry about, okay, this is the thickness. This line right here is the top of the box. And I need to make a box that looks like a box. Don't be afraid to use the lines as guidelines. That's what they're here for. They help with perspective. So, alright. The lines are your friends. They're not gonna steer you wrong. But yeah, if you think of a perspective grid as a big old pizza shaped like a rectangle, divided into many pizzas, not many pizzas, many pieces, it becomes easier to make yourself when you're drawing on paper like this. And then when you're adding things, you need to just pick a point either above or below this old horizon line, and you need to find out where you want your box to be set, how thick it is, and how far back you want it to go. So on a horizon line, let's review. On a horizon line, going back towards the center point makes it thicker, and going to the left and or right makes it wider. So what we're going to do with your piece, now that we know how perspective works, is we are going to divide up your piece, just like how I showed you. You can use as many subdivisions as you need. But I'd like it be best if you keep the lines and perspective lines very light, so you can easily erase them. And then we're gonna figure out where everything goes. So if right in the middle, you have this cute little alien girl, and her chair is right about in the middle, maybe a little bit lower on the horizon line. Okay? And I know you're like, wait, that chair looks a little flat. That's because it's in the middle. The middle sometimes is harder to see what's behind it unless it's lower or higher. You can either see the higher, which is the underside, or lower, where you see the top of the object. So you're either going to see the underside or the top of when it's above or below the horizon line. So as you can see here, I'm playing with what I see, and I'm adding in that first chair right in the middle. And I'm just gonna put a little alien head right here. And now let's do Screech to the left. To the right, sorry. If we take on Screech, we're gonna keep this seat parallel by drawing a line over. But we're gonna but since it's coming this way, since it's going either left or right, that means it's going to be thicker on one side. So the side that it's going to be thicker on is the direction it's going out to. So if I take this point and I come out here, it's going to the right, which means this side on the left will be showing. Don't forget to make sure that you are following the lines on the grid. There's our little Screechy fella. And now for the third one. We're going to the left, so it's thicker on the right. And that's going to make a nicer perspective for you to continue on the sides. Whether it's thicker or extra thick on the sides, it depends on how close it is to the center point. This is the center point for making it thicker or thinner. So if it's farther away, you're going to see more of the side. If it's closer to the middle, you're going to see less of the side. now you're probably thinking, oh no, I have 2 rows of chairs. Well, lucky for us, we know where our horizon is. And we also know that the higher we go, the more we're going to see underneath. It may not affect the middle row since it's on the horizon, but everything above the middle row we'll see the underside of. So the ones on here are going to look a little bit similar on the sides to the other ones at the bottom. Maybe the bottom of the seat will be a little bit raised like that, more so than like this, where you can see this part. The middle's more like this because the seats don't move. So that seat will be right here, actually. And as you can see, I'm just filling it in, finding where the boxes sit. Giving them sides that line up with the grid that I made. And there you go. That is how you make the theater in perspective. And now we're just going to touch on characters. Just a small touch, nothing big. Now that we know how perspective works, we can start taking what we had on this perspective grid and using it on characters. My bad, I made it a little wobbly. We're just gonna move the extra. Oh! Alright. This is the fun part. I can lower the opacity, which is equivalent to erasing part of your sketch, erasing all the guidelines that you have right here. But we're not done yet with the characters. So the characters would be just as similar. You just have to find out where you want their heads to be. Fill them in. And then we need to talk about anatomy, because that's where I come in. The human body looks, or any type of basic body, for a humanoid figure, follows simple shapes. And when you follow these simple shapes, it's easier to plot out what your characters are doing. Alright? Now, what are these simple shapes? Well, some people use a circle for the head, a rectangle for the head, or a cylinder for the head. There's all different interpretations of how you start, but these are the most common. For the arms, they're mostly cylindrical. In perspective, it would look something like that. For the chest is an egg shape because you have a rib cage. If you didn't have a rib cage, you'd be back in the 1700s wearing corsets. And then there is the pelvis. That is kind of similar to both a box and a circle. Sometimes I like to combine some of these elements to make it easier for me to define different forms or different muscles in the body. But for our purpose, we're just going to stick to something simple to this, with these for the arms and legs. So cylinders for the arms and legs, and boxes and such for the heads. So I'm going to start out by filling in the boxes in perspective, just like we did with the chairs. I have beautiful heads, and now underneath them I'm going to put a little line underneath the head to indicate a neck. And now that I have that, I can place another box, which we'll substitute right now for our rib cage. The older you are, the bigger rib cage you have. When you're small, you have a smaller rib cage. Alright? So I just blocked in my rib cages here. And now I'm going to add another line underneath it for the spinal cord. I'm going to use a circle or an oval for the pelvises. And this is where you have a little bit of trouble with. When you're doing your arms and legs, I can see you trying to do some perspective here. And that's great. It's great to practice. perspective. But we need to make sure that it looks correct. So now that we know how to put these in perspective, I want you to draw little boxes, kind of like rectangles or cylinders if you'd like, but rectangles are the easiest way to get those in. Make sure you're always lining up with your perspective grid. You have to line up with your perspective grid. Continue with the arms. You can use lines to map them out since they're small. And there you go. That is what the basics should feel like. I wanted to touch on one more point before I end this critique. The heads. In this image, we have 3 characters looking at a movie screen. But when we're in the theater and we're in the front row, usually we are looking upward. The way that you have it set up, they seem to be looking a little bit straight. The easiest way to fix that is to draw their faces again and move the X for their features upward. Instead of having his beak down here, or her eye down here, or his ears down here, we're gonna have his ears up here, his beak up here, and her eye above the cross. Because now they are looking up. Now you can do an in-between so it's not as high. And they're just slightly looking up. But from where we're looking on your image, they seem to be very straight on. This one's good. I think Screech was okay. Just raise it up a little bit more. And that's all I have for you. I hope this helps, and I look forward to seeing what you can do.